Anyway, I got asked about this Guilty Gear game again. I don't really know what else to say about it besides what I was asked about it, or a lot besides the stuff I already talked about. I checked it out like a few little bit before I left Japan, and I checked out some other people's comments. So I guess other thoughts about it to even try to give. Like I said, I think it's weird that people are talking about like, oh, they want our opinion. Maybe the game will change. Blah 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 blah. Whatever. And my opinion is, I could say you've already given your opinion on the game. That's why the game has turned out the way it did, right? Because so many people complain that games are too complicated for whatever reason. Like, oh, we don't like the way Guilty Gear has, this. I hear this common phrase that Guilty Gear has like a very variable wake up time, and I don't use that phrase because variable is too big of an English word for me, so I don't say that word, right? But people complain about, oh, variable wake up time, and there's different like weights of characters. There's just too many systems, too many mechanics, blah 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 blah. And I always think this is funny because do people even realize even back in Super Turbo there could be drastic differences depending on how the character was knocked down, which way. I've showed actually examples in videos before of this, right? Even games, what started video games, Street Fighter. Street Fighter, what all fighting games are now based on to some degree. Street Fighter had obscure differences for certain characters and certain distances, or things that might happen, right? So I just think it's so funny when people complain about games now. Any quotation make maybe newer generation game per se. Anyone trying to complain about these games is so ridiculous because so many of these people couldn't even do a low forward to Super Fireball in Super Turbo. And again, most people talking about video games, your opinion about the video game doesn't mean anything other than the fact that you bought the game. So you paid for the game. So your opinion, for some reason, for a certain amount of a reason, I guess, matters because you bought the product. So you're allowed to complain about the product you bought. But in terms of making the product better, most of you guys have never been good at a video game. And most of you guys don't know what the fuck you're talking about when it comes to video games. So I just think that's kind of funny. Like I said, most people are not good at games. You know what I mean? So there's no real point of you actually trying to pass your opinion off that you're good at video games. Because you're probably not good at video games, and you probably can't talk about video games either. So you should just probably, stop ruining it for the rest of us, right? Because video games are not more popular than they were years ago, right? Video games are not getting more popular. Street Fighter, all these kind of games, these games are not more popular, right? I mean, look at even Xrd. Apparently, Xrd didn't sell super well, and look at Xrd. Xrd is already a dumbed down Guilty Gear, right? If you like Xrd, that's fine. But Xrd is a dumbed down Guilty Gear. It's not a progressive game. In most instances, it's just at best instances, it's like one step forward, one step back. A lot of the games is just one step forward, two steps back. Like I don't care about Xrd, so I don't play it, right? Anyway, besides those combo videos I made for it, right? But anyway, so people talking about like, oh, they care about our opinion. Maybe the game will change. Blah 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 blah. This is stupid because think about it from this perspective. Why the fuck would a company show you a video game with intention? If we're to think of Guilty Gear 2020 is a drastically different take on Guilty Gear. Why would a company show you such a drastic change of a video game if the idea, quotation marks, of the game was not pretty much set in stone? This is the idea of the path of the new game. So to think that you're going to voice your opinion on this game now, and that it's going to be again, we'll use the word drastically different game when it comes to the final game, that's stupid. That's not going to happen, dude. Like, what are the chances of that happening? I would say slim and none, right? Are certain things maybe going to be changed? Yeah, I mean, certain game things change, in betas, this might get a little bit worse, this might get a little bit better, but will the game be now drastically different? Would they have showed off a game that they thought themselves was complete shit that no one is going to buy because they were going to drastically change it? That doesn't make any sense, right? And again, think about these other games. Think about all the years of different games that I've talked about how they were going to work and how I was right without even playing them. How was I correct about how Dragon Ball Fighter Z was going to work? How was I able to do all these combos instantly without ever playing? that everyone else said was not possible a year before the game came out, basically. How was that right? Because the game was not drastically different. Were there things that were different in the final version of the game? Yeah. But was the game drastically different that I couldn't look at the game and tell you what was going to work? Look at the Guilty Gears before. Remember all these B&B combos that now get used in Xrd? Remember when people were saying the game wasn't going to work like that? Do you remember that? Are people old enough to remember even a game like Xrd when that was coming out? Remember it was like, oh, they'd be like, oh no, if that was how it would work, you know, the Japanese would have been doing it. Remember when I put out those combo videos and said, oh, everything I talked about worked? Remember what ended up being the B&Bs in the game? You know what I mean? So, and there's other games too. Games don't generally drastically change from a beta to the final version of the game. Things will change, no doubt, but will the game be drastically different? So in that sense, you're going to be getting a drastically different take on Guilty Gear. And my opinion on this was that the lesser of two evils is that, okay? The best case scenario, of course, would have been a new Guilty Gear where it's everything I loved about old Guilty Gear, and it's a lot of new stuff, and it's just a new progressive thing. You could be like, wow, this is all the awesome stuff about Guilty Gear that I liked before, and there's a new progressive take on it. There's all these new things that can kind of change your perspective of what a fighting game can be, right? Looks like it's not going to be that way. So I said, the lesser of two evils is rather than having another version of Guilty Gear Xrd, which is just a trend of one step forward, two steps back, whatever, another dumbed down Guilty Gear, I would have rather had a novelty game. Because at least you can think about the novelty game that, oh, maybe it's interesting. And when I say novelty, maybe quotation marks, I say it in that I've used the example. Think about the different versions of Street Fighter. Think of like something like Super Turbo to Alpha 3. Hell, all the alphas are very different. Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3. All very different games. But again, Super Turbo to a game like Alpha 3 to the Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. I don't like Third Strike. I don't like Alpha 3. I think they suck as games. But they are interesting games in that novelty kind of fact that they're so different. They're a different take on Street Fighter. So even if I don't like the games, every now and then when I'm bored, I can still kind of watch that game and be like, wow, that's kind of a weird game. I don't like it, unfortunately. But they tried something different, so it's interesting in its own way, and I can appreciate it in that sense. So like I said, Guilty Gear. Even if this is like a totally new take on Guilty Gear, at least if it's weird, drastically different in a novelty way, you'll be able to look at it and be like, wow, this was a very different take on the game. Hopefully it's a good take on the game. I don't know about that, but we'll see. But it's a drastically different take, and it's something new, and will get people talking, and you'll be able to remember the game. Maybe you won't remember the game as it being awesome, but you'll remember the game being different, and that's good in its own way, I think. And I've talked about this, say, for the Dragon Ball FighterZ game. I use this as an example. I don't like the Dragon Ball FighterZ game. I just do combos for it when I'm bored. You know what I mean? But I can appreciate the game. There are new things in the game that are totally different for a fighting game to an extent that make it kind of interesting. So I think when you look back on this game years later, assuming nothing ever changes in a season, the next season, or if there's an update, assuming the game never changes, you'll be able to look at the game and you'll be like, wow, there are some cool ideas in this game. Unfortunately, the game sucked. That's the bad thing, right? But the good thing is that it was like different things going on, right? Now, you would have liked to be like, wow, Dragon Ball FighterZ, that was a new take on games, and it was kind of fun. It was weird and it worked, right? But unfortunately, Dragon Ball FighterZ is such a fundamentally fucked up game as a fighting game, it sucks, right? And that is maybe a potential problem that's going to happen with Guilty Gear, because I don't care that the game is maybe a dumbed down Guilty Gear per se. That doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? I don't mind the game being slower. I don't mind the game being slower per se, right? More Street Fighter is, because I like Street Fighter more than Guilty Gear a lot of times, right? I don't think that's necessarily bad, but I do think there are a lot of fundamental flaws already with the new Guilty Gear game, which is scary, right? Block damage is a big thing. Getting rid of block damage, that's baby shit. And I use this example too. People complain about no mix-up in, Dragon Ball FighterZ. Well, from a certain perspective, if you want to be really anal, guess what? There weren't a lot of mix-ups in old school Street Fighter. And you want to know what? You still couldn't block the whole time because there was chip damage. If you kept blocking, you were going to fucking die. Or the guy was going to throw you, but for sake of argument, right? So for Guilty Gear, You get rid of block damage? Like, what the fuck is the point? That is such a fucking fundamental idea of fighting games to get rid of. Like, you can't chip a guy out. Especially, you can't chip a guy out when you already have a mechanic like FD. What is the point of that? That's fucking retarded. Now there's a fucking dash button. Oh my god, there's a dash button. Now you can block all moves in the air. Huge fundamental problem of what makes a fighting game a fighting game. You can block all moves in the air. Do you realize how fucking stupid that is, dude? Such like, wow, that's terrible. Um, there's just a lot of fundamental looking flaws in the game. Here's like a potential flaw too. You think about the way dust works. I don't understand dust in this game from what I've seen. Why the fuck when you dust a guy, if it's on counter hit, and again it looks stupid. If it's on counter hit, it looks like it just does this canned string that does 3 hits and it knocks the guy and it resets the match to neutral. But the problem with this thing is like this. This could potentially be a bad thing. So you're telling me if I hit this dust on counter hit, it's always going to reset the match to neutral, and I'll do a couple more hits for a little bit more damage. But if it doesn't hit on counter hit, and I'm near the corner, the dust could be knocking the guy into this wall, and then I could be getting a bigger combo and potentially keeping the corner. What is the fun? This is like where's the logic in this? I'm confused. So I can hit a dust, and potentially, if it's hit on counter hit, I can be in a worse position than I was before. That doesn't make any sense to me. That sounds stupid. Speaking about the corner, I thought the corner seemed interesting in theory because I think the idea of potentially losing sacrificing some damage to go for like, media attacks, Oki, whatever fucking people talking like they're Japanese, right? I don't even, I'm a fucking nerd. I've jacked off the hentai before, but I really don't like using, I think it's really cringy using Japanese phrases for video games when I'm American. I don't know. I guess I say, I guess I do say like a Shoryuken and stuff like that. But whatever the case, if people say like, oh, it's Oki, blah, blah, it sounds fucking weird to me. But anyway, cringe moment away, I guess. I do think it's potentially interesting giving characters like, oh, a little bit more damage, but then it goes back to neutral, and I guess you get a little bit of a buff, or just going for this like wake up attack kind of shit, right? But the problem is when I looked at the game, and it does seem like certain moves do like more damage to the corner. It looks like just as an excuse to make a Jimmy or someone that isn't good at video games feel good about something, because it looks like, hey, I can just mash on anything, and I did a corner combo. That's what it feels like it was put in there. It doesn't look like at this stage. It doesn't look like there's enough good faith in it, a goodwill in it, and that's an interesting thing about Guilty Gear. Because I said this Guilty Beer. That's an interesting thing about Guilty Gear is a game that you can appreciate the Street Fighter in it, and that's what made Guilty Gear succeed, because you can appreciate the Street Fighter in Guilty Gear. And I've talked about this in the game theory videos, and people don't get this. You can appreciate the Street Fighter in Guilty Gear. You can appreciate the fundamental aspect that is good in Guilty Gear, right? And there's a lot of goodwill in it. And some of these changes don't seem like goodwill. They just seem like, hey, Jimmy, buy my game. Which, again, there's never been any proof that people are buying more video games now, so it's stupid. But anyway, so the corner thing, interesting idea, but it doesn't look like it's actually working how it probably should. I was hoping it'd be a little bit more cool, but I guess whatever, right? I know some people were talking about RC, and I guess RC maybe looks interesting. I know I didn't see anyone else say this. I noticed it, but I noticed when you RC that it moves that normally they cause that automatic your guy text or whatever, they don't tech. I noticed that. I didn't see anyone else say that for some reason, but that was one of the first things I noticed for combos, especially considering how off the grounds work. People were saying that they don't think there's going to be a lot of high-low mix-up. I actually couldn't appreciate that looking at the video. I know because they said that lows don't go into, you can't chain into low, into hard, or slash, or whatever the fuck you're doing. But, you can still mash on low to then sweep a dust, or mash on low, or whatever it is, to your miscellaneous attack then combo. You know what I mean? So lows already in Guilty Gear had a damage buffer on them. So I couldn't appreciate the idea that there's not going to be any high-low mix-up. I guess you just can't chain combo as long, whatever. And they're talking about like Oki, and I said it now because fucking poisoned by this community. Oh, I guess I gotta fucking say it now. Okay, whatever, right? Like, oh, the guy automatically rolls, so you can't do wake up attacks, melee attacks as easily, whatever. But the thing is, if your guy isn't always going to roll forward, if it's always a set distance that they roll back, why would there not be, high-low mix-up or make the guy wake up into stuff? You know where they're always going to get up. Imagine, just say you're Kai. I'll use Kai as an example. You do a couple, you hit the guy, then you off the ground, then you attack them, you delay your attack, and then you do the regular fireball even. The regular fireball hits a certain amount of distance late since the guy's rolling back into it. Then you have more time to run in for a high-low mix-up. Or if you think about how in the air, how there's no teching, which I also think is fucking stupid. But if you think whenever you're hitting the guy in the air, the guy automatically falls down to the ground. Well, whenever you hit the guy and you do like an air combo, imagine you just say, do Kai's hard slap. Whatever the fuck you're doing. So imagine Kai does like a couple hit air combo, whatever the fuck it is. He does hard. Then he does his air fireball and he shoots it at the guy. So the guy guy falls back. He wakes up into it. You know what I mean? He can't roll forward. He only just rolls back all the time. He rolls back into it. His jump hard as effectively acting like a knockdown attack. You cancel it into an air fireball. Who knows? Maybe you can Shinakuma in the game, like you could in old games. You can still Shinakuma even in X-Hard. You Shinakuma, then you instant air dash in, or you go for a high-low mix-up. Or maybe you just knock the guy down with any sort of air attack. Then you jump in, and you either do a jump in attack or a low attack. So I couldn't appreciate the idea that there's not going to be any high-low mix-ups. Still looked like it's going to be there to me. You just do it in a different way. I don't know. I really don't know what to say about the game. Again, I don't mind it being slower or more Street Fighter per se. Doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? It's the lesser of two evils, I think, rather than just being a completely dumbed down Guilty Gear with just one step forward, two steps back with everything. You know what I mean? So it's a new take on it. Will the game be fun? Hopefully it is. People thinking that the game's going to be super changed. I don't see why it would be super changed. From beta to beta, because games generally don't drastically change from beta to final release. Will there be changes to shit? Sure. There's probably going to be a lot of changes, but will the idea of the game be different? I don't think the game's going to have some drastically different idea. Why would it? I mean, if you even look at the normals of characters, excuse me, look at the range of attacks. Look at, what they were doing. They changed all the range of attacks, you know what I mean? Because the spacing and flow of the match is going to be different. Do we really think that now they're going to change it to like, oh, all the normals are different. We're going to be giving them different range again. All that kind of shit. So I don't know. You know what I mean? I just feel like you guys got what you want. You're talking about, oh, they'll listen to what we said. They'll change the game back to being more complicated. What do you mean? Didn't they just listen to you fucking losers in the first place? Because all you guys do is fucking complain. You guys don't even know what the fuck you're talking about, video game. It's weird because why the fuck, game companies listen to people that have never won tournaments and they can't fucking, they're not good at games. Like, what the fuck value do they have other than that they bought the game? Which means a little bit of something, but again, it's not making the game better. Games aren't more popular listening to these kind of stupid opinions. You know what I mean? This accessibility thing, that it's not making it, right, dude? So, yeah, really not sure what to say about it. I think people got what they wanted. Now they're butthurt because they went full potato with it. So, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. That's the kind of point. It could be interesting. I mean, I get, but what worries me is there's a lot of fundamental problems with it now that are bad for fighting games. So again, I don't mind it necessarily being a new take on Guilty Gear. That's fine, but I don't like them also fucking up fundamental shit. Because Guilty Gear is a game that was an anime game. For now, for a negative perspective, it's an anime game in a bit of a negative way, I think now. But Guilty Gear was an anime game that succeeded before because there was good faith in it. There was goodwill, good fundamentals in it, actually. You could still appreciate some of the things that made fighting games what they are today in Guilty Gear. It was a well-designed game in certain areas, right? That you could still appreciate that. So, whatever the case, yeah, whatever. We'll see how it turns out. I could go on and on about other stuff I've seen and other ideas I've had. Maybe I should I should blow my load or something, tell you how the game's gonna work for all this other shit too. See if I'm right again for another game, but I'll hold my opinion till I see a few more videos of the game before maybe I spoil how the game is going to work. Like I have all these other games, but we'll see till then. Anyway, the end.